Okay, so to find the value of the trigonometric ratio to the nearest 10,000th, you are literally just going to put it into your calculator. So this particular one is tangent of 18 degrees. You do want to make sure that you check your mode and that you are in degrees. And then you are just going to put in the tangent of 18 and hit enter. And you're going to use this tangent key right here. It wants to do the nearest 10,000th, which is 4 decimal places. This is 0.32491. So if you're going to round this 9, you need to look at the number to the right. If it is 4 or below, you keep it the 9. If it is 5 or above, you're going to round it up. In this case, it was 4 or below. So your answer is just going to be the 0.3249. All right, for the next section, it says find the value of each trigonometric ratio. In this case, you need to leave it in the exact value or in fraction form. You need to pay attention to what it's asking for. It's asking for cosine and which angle it's talking about, in this case, angle A. So you need to find angle A, and you need to label your triangle according to angle A. And so for angle A, the hypotenuse will stay the same for all of them, but angle A, the opposite would be the 3, and the adjacent would be the 4. For cosine, cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. So in this case, the cosine of A is going to be adjacent over hypotenuse. And that is how you will leave your answer for this one. For the next section, we are looking for the measurement of the angle. Anytime you're looking for an angle, you want to use the inverse functions, these little small functions above your sine, cosine, and tangent. So you are going to use your second button here or your shift button. The first thing you want to do is you want to look at what angle you're talking about. In this case, we're talking about this angle where it has the question mark. So we're going to label our triangle accordingly. For this particular angle, of course, hypotenuse is always across from the right angle. This side here would be my opposite side, and the 3 would be my adjacent. So then I'm going to look and see which sides I have numbers for. I have numbers for adjacent and hypotenuse. So I will be using my cosine function here because cosine deals with adjacent over hypotenuse. So I would say then that the cosine of the angle that I'm looking for, let's say angle A, is going to equal the adjacent side 3 over the hypotenuse side 8. Since I'm using my inverse functions, then the cosine inverse function here of 3 divided by 8 would then equal the angle that I'm looking for. And so when you plug that into the calculator, you would say shift cosine, and then you would put in the 3 divided by 8, and it would give you 67.9756. Your question asked for the angle to the nearest degree, so we're going to round that. I'm going to look at the 9, which is to the right of my 67, my nearest degree. Because it's above 5, I am going to round to 68 degrees, which is how I get my final answer here. The next section wants me to find a missing side. So in this case, I'm going to go back to my standard function sine, cosine, and tangent because I have my angle. I am going to look at the angle that I have been given, and I am going to label my triangle accordingly. Hypotenuse is always across from the right angle. In this case, the other side that I have is the opposite side. So I'm going to think which function deals with opposite and hypotenuse, and that is my sine function. So the sine of 55 degrees should equal opposite over hypotenuse. To solve this particular one, you're going to multiply both sides by that 11, which will cancel on this right side and leave the x. Multiply this side by 11. So in your calculator, you would put in 11 times the sine of 55, and you will get 9.01067. It wants to the nearest 10th, so I'm going to look at my 10th place and look 1 over. To the right of it is a number less than 5, so I'm going to keep that as 0, and my final answer here would be 9.0. Now this next section wants to find the length of the side that is labeled x, and so I am trying to find this side right here, but I do not have enough information at first. So the first thing I need to do is solve for this adjacent side, this dotted side, and I am going to use the triangle to the left here to solve for that side. So if I were to look at just this 70 degrees, I'm going to label my triangle opposite and adjacent. I'm solving for the opposite side. I have my adjacent side. So that means I am going to use the tangent function of 70 degrees should equal opposite over adjacent. And so when I solve for this, I'm going to multiply both sides by that 11. And in my calculator, I will do 11 times the tangent of 70, which will give me 30.22225, and it keeps going. And that is this opposite side here. So if I were to write that in, this side right here is 30.2. Now I'm going to look at it from the perspective of the triangle on the right side of this figure here. And so on this side, I have this 32 degrees. So if I were to look at this 32 degrees, my opposite side would be down here. And now, this is not the opposite side for this triangle. This would be the adjacent side. And so I am still actually going to use the tangent function. Tangent of 32 degrees equals the opposite, x, over the adjacent, 30.2. And so again, to solve for this, I am going to multiply both sides by that 30.2, 30.2. So in my calculator, I will multiply 30.2 times the tangent of 32, which will give me approximately 18.871, and it keeps going. It wants it rounded to the nearest tenth. So if I'm going to round to the nearest tenth, that's this place right here, the first decimal. I'm going to look to the right of it. The 7 will round me up, so that will round me to 18.9, which is what you get as your final answer here. The last thing you have here are word problems. So we're going to read the word problem and we're going to sketch what it looks like. If a man is just about to ski down a steep mountain, he estimates the angle of depression from where he is now to the flag at the bottom of the course to be 24 degrees. He knows he is 800 feet higher than the base of the course. How long is the path that he will ski? So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to sketch this slope that he is doing for the skiing, and I'm going to label what's going on for this particular word problem. And so angle of depression is from his line of sight at the top down. So this angle right here is 24 degrees. So that would cover that angle of depression. And then 800 feet above the base of that slope, that means he is 800 feet in the air. How long is the path that he will ski? That will be the slope itself. So we are going to be solving for the slope itself. Now, when you have an angle of depression, sometimes it's easier to flip it to the angle of elevation from the base. And so because of the concept of alternate interior angles, that means the angle down here is also 24 degrees. And so if I were to label this particular triangle based on that angle right here, then I have the hypotenuse, which is what I'm looking for, and the opposite. So because of that, I am going to use the sine function. Sine is opposite over hypotenuse. Sine of 24 degrees equals opposite 800 over hypotenuse. Remember, when what you're solving for is on bottom, you are going to divide. So 800 divided by sine of 24 will equal my x. And when I take the 800 and divide it by the sine of 24, I will get 1,966.8746, and it keeps going. It wants it to the nearest tenth. So I'm going to look at my 10th place right here and look at the number next to it. It is greater than 5, so I'm going to round up. So my final answer here is going to be 1,966.9 feet.